While in prison, I began to hate myself. I began to hate myself because of the pain that I caused the victim's mother. I hated myself because of the grief and long suffering that my family endured because of my ignorance and stupidity. This hate turned to anger, and I was angry at myself for not listening to my parents when I knew I should have. I was angry because I brought shame to them, to my community, and to myself.
And that one of many scenes and many kind of stories that are similar to that. You know, there's people at home saying, hey, listen, things are tough. I'm trying to stretch a buck. These guys had their chance and they blew it. Why should we care that they get a second chance?
I think that the question for me has always been about redemption and second chances and that we should be doing this work. But the reality of it is, this is about public safety. It's not about helping that one person get a degree or go to college. It's about protecting the communities that we love. And if we spend the buck now, we will protect our communities later. They come back as role models for these younger generations, that these younger kids listen to these men that have been there, and they play all these different roles. Almost all the men and women that have been through this program and are now home have ended up in the social services field. They're caseworkers, service providers, social workers. They're really good at it, and it's a field that having a felony background has not stopped them from getting into. So it's a good fit. All these men and women are employed, they're all working in one of the toughest economic times ever. And that says a lot.
I know you're not. There's been some voices who are opposed to this who say, frankly, screw them, you know? And I know you don't fall in that camp. And you got caveats. But if I told you, and you knew, right, it was empirical data, now psychobabble, that if I really spend a buck, I'll get $12 in return, right, in terms of not filling the prison cell, not hurting somebody, whatever else, would you swallow hard and say, I'll still do it, or would you still be opposed to it?
I'm relatively supportive of the program, but I want to do right by the taxpayer first. If you got math out of Albany, it's probably funny math. I want to get back to a point I made before. This program is successful with private philanthropy. Why couldn't we expand that? Why do we say the private philanthropic world won't fund it, so now we're going to force the taxpayers to fund it?
Is the money there if you just keep asking for it?
We've now expanded into 5 facilities. There's 334 men and women currently in the program in New York, in Hudson Link. It is very difficult operating not knowing if there's going to be a next semester. It's hard on us as an organization. It's even harder on the students who stop me in the halls and say, am I going to school next semester? And me not knowing, it's very difficult to operate that way with no cushion. And while the Harry Belafontes and the Tim Robbins and the Warren Buffetts and Doris Buffett have been very helpful and supportive, it's just not enough. It has not been enough. And if there's another way to do it, I'd totally be open to it, but I haven't heard it yet. And also this funding that we're talking about, the $5,000 a year that the governors mentioned, is the same $5,000 that these men and women would have been eligible for anyway through TAP funding through the state because of their poverty levels.
And that's part of the issue is, this isn't they get a special loan somebody else wouldn't get. This is a TAP and Pell, right? This is TAP funding that they'd be eligible for strictly on their income level, regardless of where they are. So whether they were outside or inside, they'd be eligible for this. It's not like your kid, my kid couldn't get the loan if they didn't qualify on the number side. This is just...
Right, but often the felony conviction prevents you from getting some of these loans. So when you commit the felony and you're adjudicated and you're found guilty.
But you don't think that should be a barrier to them getting educated? You just have a question where it comes from.
I think they should get educated. But you know, we haven't exhausted the private market. You know, you guys are trying to do it internally. Everybody's been talking about this issue. We have to educate prisoners to drop the recidivism rate. Why didn't the governor come out and make the conversation for the last week? This is something that we can be done. We can do it philanthropically. Let's try that for as much as we can. And if the conversation was that, the governor's not going back to the taxpayer. He's going to try to do this with private resources because it's good for the state. We could have made a much bigger difference than a small non-for-profit.
This same governor's been angering a lot of people on the left when it comes to cutting taxes here, cutting funding for certain things. So he's hardly going to be confused, fiscally at least, with some left-winger here, as we all know, with the fight over universal pre-K and a bunch of other things. Okay, Dominic, I've heard the argument that this you could compare it almost to a vaccination. It costs money for a vaccination, but a vaccination keeps you from getting sick. Again, you, like the Assemblyman, a couple of years ago fell in the same exact category as we have other places where we can spend money, but you changed your mind. Why did you change your mind when you went in with healthy cynicism?
I came into this position stronger in opposition. I'm surprised that the Assemblyman, the amount of support that he's showing for the program. He's saying with private dollars, but he's still supporting it. My opposition was double his. My opposition was, and I didn't express this, was to hell with them. But you have to understand, from where I come from, and this is why Sean, I'm in such admiration of him, because from the hood, if you will, I grew up in the projects. One thing he said that's right, you know, so kids like myself and others, you go into one of two types of colleges. This is the way I rationalized it growing up. Most of my friends went to the other college from my community, which was jail. That was where you went. Maybe one or two like me got the opportunity to actually go to school. But one thing that he's so right about, we can say whatever we want. These men are going back to the community. And guess what? Who do you think the kids, this may be a sad fact, who do you think they have more respect for and listen more to? Me or the guy that came out of prison? They listen to the guys that came out of prison. And if those guys are coming home with a degree, each one teach one, and they can help the community, they can say to these young, yo young brother, don't make the mistake that I made. I don't see why we wouldn't do this. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
The other thing for me that surprised me was the audience. I'm sitting in the audience, but you look around, and it's the first time, and this isn't enough reason to do it, I'm not pretending it is, but for the first time these families are proud. They look at somebody, and they're not in a jumpsuit, they're in a cap and gown. And the kids, they grew up without a father, right? Actually, you can see they're standing up a little taller, and they want, you know, they'll tell about where their father is and what he did, and he got a degree. And there's a better chance, I think, that they stay out of trouble. And we always talk about this vicious cycle, and it's real, but if you can break it, even a little bit, and let's be honest, we're not talking about every inmate, 50,000 inmates. I mean, how hard is it, and how long does it take to get a good degree here?
We started with 16 students 15 years ago, and we're only enrolling 334 now after 15 years. This has not been thousands of men and women trying to get into this program or can do it. College isn't for everybody. But I will never forget one of the students' daughters at graduation saying, you know what, Dad, if you can do it in this place, then I can do it. And in all honesty, like you said, these are communities that traditionally do not go to college. So all of a sudden, we're not affecting that one life, that one degree. We have this rippling effect that's going back to communities and changing lives. And that man's daughter just graduated with her 2-year degree at SUNY Sullivan.
Really? All right, when we come back, I'm going to ask you something where this thing goes from here in Albany. As we said, there's objections not just in the Senate and the Assembly as well. Even a few Democrats have voiced some opposition as well here. Where this goes politically, we'll talk about straight ahead.